In this section, we're going to take a look at functions, and functions are particularly important in Python because one of the strengths of Python is the fact that it is a functional language. That is, it can treat functions not just as something that you can call by name, but also something that you can refer to as an object. We'll start off simply by taking a look at the def keyword. That's how you define a function. And we'll see how the arguments that you define, you can specify default values for them. And along with default arguments, we're also going to mention something related to that. Those are named arguments, so that when you call a function, you can pass in parameters by name rather than specific ordering them. We'll talk about docstrings, and these are strings that are incorporated into the application and are available for documentation purposes and are visible to other tools. And then we'll move on to some of the more advanced topics. So we'll talk about function objects. As I mentioned, Python is a function-oriented language, and it is capable of treating functions as objects in their own right. We're going to talk about classes. And the concept of a class is basically the idea of a programmer-defined or an application-specific data type that you can define within your application. So this is an important concept that relates to extensibility. You're not limited to just the built-in data types that Python provides. You can also define your own specialized data types as classes. So this is a very important aspect of object-oriented programming, and of course Python is an object-oriented programming language. And so we'll first of all take a look at how to define a class. So after we're finished talking about how to define a class, we're going to talk about how to implement the code that's responsible for initializing a new instance of that class. And then we'll talk about class inheritance, and this is an important form of code reuse so that you can factor common functionality, common members from multiple classes that are similar but slightly different from one another, and then promote the common features into a base class that they all inherit from. Class inheritance is another important aspect of object-oriented programming. And then the final important aspect of object-oriented programming that we'll take a look at is something known as data hiding. And that is that an object that's an instance of a class should obviously have some things that are visible outside of that class so that it's useful to the rest of the program. But quite often there are internal implementation details that are best left invisible to the outside world. And so data hiding is about making some members of a class only visible to code within that class, which is again a very important aspect of good object-oriented programming practices.